the dust and dirt and light explode into the dawn. Explode into the dawn.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast, where we talk with musicians and songwriters about the songs and the writing and the playing. This episode is a conversation I was very much looking forward to. Our guests are Harris Paseltiner and Dave Senft, two of the four members of the band Darlingside. We've been big Darlingside fans here at Tell You What HQ for some time, so this one was a treat. The four members of Darlingside met at college in Massachusetts and have been a band for over 10 years. They just released their fourth full-length album, Fish Pond Fish. It is a remarkable record. I've really enjoyed digging into it. As I discussed with Dave and Harris, the way the songs on this one came together was different in several ways from their previous outings. Some of these changes were by design in terms of their songwriting approach, and some by circumstance, as the pandemic and quarantine interrupted the recording and production process. The final product here is just wonderful. I have, as usual, included portions of the songs we discussed within the episode. But there is just so much going on in many of these songs, I could not do them justice with a brief clip. So I strongly recommend you giving them all a full listen. We also get a chance to talk about Darlingside's approach to live performance. They're one of my favorite live acts out there. If you are familiar with their music, you would likely expect their meticulous and beautiful arrangements to translate well to a live setting, and they certainly do. But their stage presence and connection with each other and with the audience adds another layer of entertainment and fulfillment to the shows. So for now, purchase and listen to this great record, Fish Pond Fish, as we all look forward to seeing Darlingside and all the other great working musicians at some live shows sometime soon. Quick shout out to Karen Wiesen at All Eyes Media, and again to Eric Jones at Homestead Artist Management for their help in putting this one together. Very much appreciated. But for now, let's get to it. Here is our Tell You What discussion with Dave and Harris of Darlingside. All right, Dave, Harris, welcome to Tell You What, the podcast. Thanks for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us, Mike.
I am in Tell You What headquarters in Evanston, Illinois. I was talking to Dave earlier, and I understand you two are not in your home state of Massachusetts. We don't have to disclose where you are, but we are in three different places, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm actually comfortable saying that I'm down in Austin, Texas right now.
It sounds comfortable.
Yeah, it's pretty nice weather.
Yeah, we are both with the in-laws for the holidays, although actually Harris is there for a much longer period of time.
You are wintering in Austin, Dave tells me, Harris.
That's correct, yeah. I'm enjoying really nice weather and time with family during the pandemic.
That's great. This is the first time I've done an interview with three people in three different places, but I think if we all cooperate, we should be able to pull this off. So thanks in advance for your cooperation. Let's go back in time if we can, as you both think back to your early days. Is there music you remember being a part of your home, your community, that you remember from your earliest musical memories, and maybe as some of that made its way into your creative life currently? Harris, if you want to take this first.
Sure, yeah. I started playing classical cello when I was 6 years old, and
Wow.
I was playing at the Music Institute of Chicago, and started playing chamber music at 8 years old, piano trios in particular, and then orchestral music at high school. And my brother also played piano, my mom played piano, and so there was always music in the house when I was growing up, and a lot of that traditional classical training ended up changing when I started to explore new things when I met these guys who are in the band when I went off to college and started playing modern music with them.
Dave, how about you? Early days, music in your life?
Yeah, I I would say that I was into a cappella before it was cool, but I guess I don't know if it ever was truly cool. But I certainly thought it was very cool in high school. I wasn't in a group. My dad and mom would take me to, college a cappella competitions, and my dad actually emceed some of them because he got really into the community for a little while, and
Wow.
so yeah, that was something I was excited to try in college, having never really taken any lessons in music. My family all sang, and we had certain hymns that we sang at family gatherings and that kind of thing. But then, getting involved in an actual performing group turned out I had pretty extreme performance anxiety, but kind of worked through that over the course of my or some of that in college, and got to the point where I just couldn't get enough music, and was starting to write songs with some friends. Williams College offers a singer-songwriter course that everyone in Darlingside did end up taking, although we all took it at different times. And so that was kind of where I got my start thinking about songwriting, and starting to, the final exam, if you will, for that class is to perform a song that you wrote in front of a live audience of many of your peers. And it's a pretty popular event. So that was really, I can't imagine ever performing, a song that I'd written without that course sort of forcing me to do it. And then, songwriting just kept being a thing that all of us and some other friends of ours at school just kept doing more and more, until we got to the point where we said, let's just keep doing this after college ends. And we all graduated at different times, but for a little while there, I had graduated, but Harris was still in school, and so we were kind of commuting to see each other and write music together. And I remember we were in Oxford when in Oxford, England, Harris was studying abroad, and I was with Auyon, who was doing a fellowship in Ireland, and we ended up taking a trip to Oxford, where Auyon's brother was also there, studying with Harris and rooming with Harris. And that was when I remember Harris and I kind of at some point towards the end of that trip sort of did a pinky swear kind of thing, like we will make music together after school. And here we are. That
class story is interesting. Harris, was that your first experience with songwriting also, or had you been doing it before that?
I had done a few, I wouldn't call them very strong efforts, but started dabbling and trying to create songs from scratch for the first time. Sort of near the end of high school, I was picking up acoustic guitar and trying to teach myself to play chords. I think sort of as a foil to the more formal cello training, to just kind of have some fun playing an instrument where I actually didn't even know the names of the strings on the guitar. If somebody asked me, I was just kind of feeling it by ear, and started to kind of write a few, I would call them sort of emo pop punk songs near the end of high school. But when I started to really think about crafting melodies and song structures and things like that, that was when I met these guys at school and started taking that songwriting course. And trying to write even, different genres of music, things like sort of more singer-songwriter types of songs that could be performed alone, and then building out to more songwriting for ensembles.
Right. Great. So Dave kind of gave us the story of the early, the roots, if you will, of Darlingside. I want to get into your collaborative process a little bit, if I can. I'm really curious to hear about how the four of you work together. I know it's likely changed over time. You've been to band for, 10 years or so, right? But can you talk about your process, first in terms of how the ideas germinate? Are you sitting around a table with a blank page? Are you bringing ideas you have worked on your own for a while into the group? How are things getting started?
Well, you're right to say, or to guess that things have changed over the 10 years that we've been together. I would say initially, coming from a singer-songwriter background, and all of us having different musical educations of one kind or another. There was a lot more of one person bringing an idea to the group that was somewhat more fleshed out. Maybe the lyrics were essentially written by one person and tweaked by the other people. But it was really, I would say we were individuals first. We were kind of individual songwriters first, and a group second is maybe how I would describe it in retrospect. And that
Right.
Over time, it's become much more that the group is primary, and our individual aesthetics is subordinate to that, and that we, there's no sense of ownership now over ideas, or there's some, obviously you know which ideas you maybe submitted, and there's some of that, but there's no competitiveness. There's no, we've tried to stay and grow even more, kind of radically egalitarian in everything we do, and thinking of
Right.
everything is owned by all four of us, and we're all part of getting it there, even if one of us happened to do more of the work for a particular song. And part of that has been that the germination of the ideas, like you're saying, has become more of a group process. So this time we started things off with a bunch of group exercises that were intended to generate ideas as a group, so that we all felt really connected to that initial kernel of an idea.
That was for this album.
Yeah, and we've done some of that for previous albums, but we were really intentional this time about experimenting with some exercises that would get the lyrics a little bit earlier in the process, because we often write melodies and then you kind of fit the lyrics to it like a crossword puzzle, and you try to make it all fit the timing. But we were interested in doing some writing exercises that would really generate things from the group brain, sort of a group consciousness that involved sort of games of telephone, where you would start with some prompt and then pass it to the next person, and they would write a little free write, just whatever comes to mind, write for 30 minutes straight, no form.
While you were all sitting in the same room.
Sometimes yes, but actually, funny enough, this was before any quarantining or pandemic stuff, but we part of the one of the intentions of the exercises that we were doing was so that we could do some more remote writing. So it would be, we'd all be at our own houses, and we'd have a 30-minute window to write your thing and then pass it to the next person, and they would sort of advance it to, if you receive a free write, then your job is to try to turn it into something that's more in verse, that has maybe a rhyme scheme or just a rhythmic structure or something like that, and then the next person would try to put a melody to that. I would not have necessarily predicted how successful that was in making me incredibly invested in everything that was generated from that process, because whether I was the one who wrote the melody, or whether I had written the free write, or even just supplied a one-word prompt, whatever it was, I felt really connected to the end product and really proud of it. And that's a really important thing when you're playing the songs night after night, that you're not getting on stage feeling like, oh, this is Auyon's song or this is my song, because
Right.
that can just get tiring, and it's just great when you all feel connected to everything you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Running off of what Dave was just saying, we would often take those various writing exercises and dump them all into a shared document. In particular, we have it in the Google universe in a Google Doc, and we would basically write down all of the words that came from passing these ideas around into sort of one shared sheet of paper, and then anybody at a later date would be able to go in and access that shared document and lift lines from it and reconfigure things. And sometimes it would be this sort of Frankensteining of a bunch of different bits and pieces that have been written into this document, sometimes over the course of months of time. And by the end, what's really nice is diving back into those documents. Sometimes you don't even know who wrote what line when.
Right.
It's just sort of a community. I would almost call it like a group brain dump or something. It's like our shared consciousness, and you can tap into that anytime and not worry about who owns this, who owns that, who started it, who ended it. It's just sort of there for the taking and for the building. And the same thing's true from a melodic standpoint. Like we took our various voice memos, somebody just singing into an iPhone a little idea, maybe for a bridge motif or for a verse tune or a chorus idea, and just take all those voice memos and dump them into folders where people can then go and mine them at a later date and take them out and say, hey, this would be a cool idea. Why don't we mash it up with my idea that I've been playing on the guitar, and then it becomes something new. So this sort of shared pool of melodic bits and a shared pool of lyrical bits would end up kind of fusing together to become group songs.
Yeah. I noticed that the songwriting is all credited to Darlingside, the band, as opposed to different combinations of band members, which is not that common. This goes with what you're saying. I remember REM did this. Their songs were always credited to Barry, Buck, Mills, Stipe. And I think this was a reflection on how they viewed themselves as a band. It was part of the ethos of the band itself. And I'm kind of getting that vibe from what you're talking about here. It's certainly served them well over a long career. Can maybe you talk a little bit more about how you view the project of Darlingside as an entity in this sense, that you're all kind of in this together, part of one unit?
Yeah, that was definitely a conscious decision early on when we first moved into a house together in Hadley, Massachusetts. We were all living in this shared space and cooking meals together in the evening, and it was right on the Connecticut River. It was a really nice first 2 years to being a band together. And in that time, we were sort of formulating how we think of the group and how we write and how we share things and how we view this entity together. And I remember there was a group dinner when we were around the table, and somebody was chatting about how the way to really have a good long career where we can all care about this thing together is to split everything equally all the time and credit everything equally all the time, no matter what. And part of that has to do with the fact that regardless of if some individual person came up with all of the lyrics and the entire tune of a song, the reason that they're able to go out and play it is because somebody else was working on promoting the show, and somebody else was working on booking the show, and somebody else was working on arranging the string parts for the song, and the other people were working on practicing singing the parts and how to perform them live. And the idea that any individual would own the thing, it would overlook sort of all of the really important critical work that's happening maybe behind the scenes that's allowing everything to move forward together. So part of that was trusting each other and giving the benefit of the doubt to every other member, sort of saying, no matter what, as long as we feel that everybody's here pulling equally hard for this thing that we care about, everybody owns everything equally all the time.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you talked about 10 years of doing this and your ability to work together now, but how difficult was it for you individually at the beginning to bring your ideas to a group of 3 people? That's actually a lot of people in terms of exposing your creative self, right? Creation can be such a personal process. Was it difficult to learn to open yourself up and allow your ideas to be vetted, if you will, by 3 people?
Yeah, that is exactly right, that it was very challenging, at least for me at first. You can sort of be committed to the group being democratic and egalitarian in principle, and then when it comes down to a specific idea that you're convinced that it's the right thing and you want to get it through somehow, it does feel like, I have to run the gauntlet of getting this by, I have to get Harris to sign off on it, and Don has to sign off on it, and Auyon has to sign off on it, and you start thinking, what's the right way to present it to Don so that he doesn't, hate this idea that I think is perfect. And then over time, you just, at least for me, that way of thinking just dissolved into, and maybe this wouldn't be the case in every group, but at least in our group, we developed so much trust in each other that, it just became, if Don doesn't like it, there's going to be a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean I'm wrong to like something if he doesn't like it, but we haven't really been led astray by the principle of not 100%, but for the most part, decisions needing to be fairly unanimous. There can definitely be some dissenting voices that you realize that you're overruled and it's time to let go of something or accept something. But certainly we all need to be comfortable with everything we write, and we all need to be excited to perform it. I think it's hard to say if that works in every group, but for us it's just that trust, I think, did take some time to develop, but then once it was there, it makes that whole process a breeze.
I definitely, running off of what Dave's saying there, I know personally that especially early on with the group, I think that I was looking to constantly make everybody happy all the time and to be acknowledged, especially out of the gate. Like if you're going to play a new idea in the room for somebody, it's like you want them to immediately approve of it, give acknowledgement, give the stamp of approval, everything's good to go, and sort of a fear of rejection. Like if the idea is not good enough, it's a personal fault. And I think that especially over the past few years, I've noticed a growing comfort in myself, and I think partially just due to the trust with all the other guys, of being comfortable with rejection or with failing or with presenting an idea and having somebody not like it and be okay with that and sort of say, okay, it's not a reflection on my personhood, it's not a reflection on whether or not I'm an okay songwriter or something. It's just like this person sees things differently from me, and now we can work to try to find common ground moving forward. So I think just trying to get comfortable with, for me, sharing things earlier and in an imperfect state.
Right.
And I think Dave actually in particular has helped me with this, because he oftentimes will dig into my voice memos from my iPhone and become pretty attached to certain very raw performances of song ideas while we're coming up with them. And these raw ideas would be things that I would usually be pretty uncomfortable, at least early on in the band, sharing with other people, because my voice is cracking and I'm, messing things up all over the place, and it's totally not presentable in any fashion. And the fact that Dave likes those things is actually very reaffirming. It's like things don't need to be perfect when they're presented. They just need to be human and real and expressive. And so focusing on that and not being afraid of failing has been, I think, especially in the last, for this album process, for Fish Pond Fish, I noticed that change in the way that I approach sharing things with the guys.
Yeah, my personal motto has become, I was moved by the demo, because I just ended up saying that in so many scenarios. But yeah, if I had a role in the group creatively, it's probably that I'm most often the one to get attached to things the way they are and to say, we don't need to change it, it's perfect, it's great, like I'm moved by it, and then it, very often I'm overruled, and the change is very often for the better, and then I regret being the one who didn't want it to change. So I was trying really hard to reflect on that tendency this time around, and I still ended up doing it a lot, but I'm trying to get more comfortable with the evolution that happens in each song.
Yeah, I would imagine that some of the fear and anxiety you might have early on in this creative life you've had together evolves into sometimes a feeling of power with the group, and knowing that you have the support and the trust of three other people, like-minded people. So it certainly shows, and I think that the way you all work together is certainly one of the signature qualities that you have as a band. I mean, it definitely shows. That's not news, I don't think, to anybody out there.
The power, with great power comes great responsibility thing. Definitely, I was talking to Auyon about how I felt, looking back at older albums, the things that I had the hardest time, regret is a strong word, but the things that I regretted, I'll just use the word, were basically in terms of how the album came out, were almost across the board things that I had fought for, and then decided that I was, I was wrong at the time. So it doesn't take much of that before you start realizing, okay, maybe I need to not fight so hard and, trust the other guys a little bit more. And there are still times that you fight, but it's very helpful to go in with that sort of wariness over, taking a strong stand and knowing that if you're going to use that power, because we're four equal voices, so people are going to listen to you and they're going to trust you. But if you're going to take a stand, it better be one that you feel good about. Not that it's okay to make bad decisions or decisions that you regret, but I think that's been a really important part of, for me, letting my individual power in the group, trying to be responsible with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to shift gears here a bit. I want to talk about live performance. I'm sure you remember that from some time ago.
Vaguely, yeah.
It's a blur.
Bittersweet subject, but certainly worth discussing with Darlingside, and something we have to look forward to. I've seen you all perform several times. I have to say shows are among the more entertaining I've seen, and I've seen a lot of shows. I think most of my listeners know I'm an older person. But by entertaining, I mean that kind of holistically, the entire package of what you're doing on stage, no small part of which is what goes on between the songs. So can you talk about what a good live performance means to you, what it is you all are trying to accomplish when you give a live show?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I usually care a lot about authenticity and really getting this impression that everybody's spending time together in the room as a community, and that we are being ourselves and spending time with the room in the same way that we would be spending time with each other as friends. And I remember when we first started out as a band, we would plan what we were saying between the songs, sort of talking portions of, and here's where I get this point across and things like that. And it felt very stilted. It didn't have a sort of natural flow to it. And I think part of that songwriting process, this idea of sharing and sharing things equally, having that carry through to the shows where the four of us should be sort of sharing what the group feels like with the room and bringing people along for the journey, both with the songs and the time in between that we spend together. To me, my favorite shows are not necessarily the ones where we play the songs most accurately or where the sound is the best, although that doesn't hurt at all. I think those allow us to relax and just sort of share ourselves authentically with people and tap into the energy of the room in a sort of seamless way.
Right.
So for me, that kind of comfort and experience from start to finish of the show, doesn't matter whether it's music being made or the time in between the music. The whole evening should just be a community experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've found I have two really distinct mindsets that I am in when I'm performing, and figuring out how to get in the good mindset is like the great challenge of my whole, or has been the challenge of my performing career. But it's basically whether I'm focusing on not making mistakes or whether I'm in a more just the mindset of I'm just presenting this song that I wrote and I'm sharing it with people.
Right.
And I probably make roughly the same amount of mistakes either way. It's just whether my orientation is like that I'm dwelling on the last mistake I made and I'm fearing the next one, or am I, I'm just in the space in between those moments where I'm maybe I make a mistake, but they just go by. And it's almost like the pigeon pecking experiment, where the pigeons, when they get rewarded at random intervals, they become really superstitious and they try to figure out, what did I do right? How did I get rewarded? And so sometimes I'm like, what was it that I had a drink right before the show? Is it that I didn't have a drink before the show? Is it that I didn't eat spicy food or did eat spicy food? And it's like, what is, and you're like constant. I mean, early on especially, yeah, I was constantly like playing mind games with myself about what was making me feel better or worse on stage, and those things kind of just over time they dissipate, and but you still find yourself having really off nights and trying to figure out what it was that got you there, and I don't suspect I will have it figured out anytime soon.
Harris, just to follow up, in case for some of our listeners that haven't had the chance to see one of your shows, you talked about the community and the time between the songs. What I have seen happen is basically akin to like a good improv show, the talking in between the songs, right? It's like you seem to pick a thread, something that maybe happened on the road that week, somebody wanted coffee or lost their Frisbee or something, and then throughout the show, different members kind of riff on that theme, possibly poking fun at one another. It is really well done. Obviously, it's a product of the years you all have spent together, but the comedic touch and the timing are really, I think it's quite deft. I think you guys have a gift here for this.
Thank you.
Is that something that has just developed over time on its own, or is that like a conscious effort to say, here's how we're going to do this?
Yeah, I think it developed naturally when we, a few years into being a band, we moved to a 4-piece without drums and kind of recontextualized the way we were performing live from sort of more of a rock concert vibe to a living room vibe. And I think that it happened, we went to the Folk Alliance, International Folk Alliance in Kansas City back in, Dave, do you remember that year? It was like 2013 maybe?
13 maybe?
Dave and I were talking about this right before we recorded, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that was...
it keeps popping up.
That was when we were sort of trying to figure out a more, I would say, a stripped sort of approach to our sound, where the vocals and the vocal harmonies were coming to the forefront of what we were doing and quieting down the instrumentation and simplifying it in many senses and allowing the songwriting and the words and the singing to come through. And we were playing in the hotel rooms there at the conference center where the Folk Alliance is held in Kansas City. And in the hotel rooms, you know, you don't have amplifiers and no microphones, and it's a tiny room where people are packed in there. Sometimes it's like 40 people jamming into a little, you know, a hotel room with 2 queen beds. And we were playing the songs there and hanging out and talking in between the songs while we were tuning and setting up and just spending time with people. And we were seeing really great response at those shows, people way more engaged from start to finish. And I think it had more to do with just what is the content of the melodies that we're singing, how are our voices coming together, and who are we as people, and how are we sharing ourselves with people, not and connecting and talking with people, like actually having a conversation rather than just, you know, I think the years before that I had been very focused on sort of especially the instrumental arrangement side of things, and constantly thinking, what are we doing, you know, as a rock band to present this kind of bombastic, strong performance? And really when we just kind of turned everything down and acted as ourselves, I shouldn't even say acted, just when we were ourselves rather than acting, realized that it was not only more enjoyable for us, but that people responded to it better. And I think the banter, like the hanging out in between songs, developed from there, of sort of partially because we have so many alternate tunings and capoings and instrument switches with people playing multiple different things, that we actually just have tons of dead time between songs and needed to figure out what to do from a just sort of a technical standpoint to or a logistical standpoint, I should say, to fill in between the songs. And also just we would have these conversations in the van on the way to the show, where we'd be usually drilling down on some sort of subject. You know, it's like somebody misused a word, and now we're going into the etymology of that word, and it had to do with some menu order that somebody had from some carry-out spot. And it, you know, we'll carry on in the van sometimes for 30 minutes, an hour on those types of things. And, we oftentimes have 30 minutes of dead time between songs at a show, so we just kind of continue to do that on stage. And it turns out people sometimes want to hear relatively mundane things when we're sharing them with each other.
Yeah, I can tell you it's very entertaining, and I think it's not just that the topics are mundane or not mundane, but it's the interplay between you, and like you say, you're being yourselves up there. It's interesting that you could draw a direct line back to the hotel rooms at the Folk Alliance conference for the genesis of this kind of approach. I want to get to the album, Fish Pond Fish. I really love this album. The dynamics of it, the range of kind of calm and energetic feels, the production is so great. It seems to go places for you as a band, go new places for you as a band, while still, of course, sounding like a Darlingside record. You must be very proud of how it came out. I understand for this record, I think I read somewhere that, and you mentioned earlier actually in this conversation, you did a lot of lyric writing first before melodies, which was kind of a change from previous albums. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So did you find this process resulting directly like in the lyrics informing the music, kind of setting the musical moods, tempos, that kind of thing, rather than reverse happening before where the music kind of maybe led you to certain lyrics? Can you talk about kind of the directional interplay between lyrics and music that might have been different this time?
I'm going to let you take that, Harris, since I think the majority of the tunes that really went in that direction, I feel like Harris had a hand in writing the melodies for at least 3 that I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah, those. You were thinking like Denver and.
I'm sure a lot of those melodies were ones you already had bouncing around, and so maybe it was just a matter of playing matchmaker. And but yeah, I was thinking of Denver, and I think the "See You Change" melody was that one that you already had? Or?
Oh yeah, those did not exist in any way before the lyrics set. And so, yeah, it was new to kind of take the words and try to build, take the words, pick up a guitar, and try to build from scratch without any melody in mind. There were a few where, like I was saying before, where we have a whole bank of voice memos and old melodic bits, and then we have a whole bank of lyrics and, exercises with words. And you can kind of, like Dave's saying, match make, where it's let me rifle through 12 different voice memos and see if any of these match the cadence of the words from this writing exercise. Mm-hmm. And a few of the songs ended up that way. But there were other ones that did truly just grow directly out of the lyrics. Denver's an example of that on the back half of the record. And it was fun. I actually enjoyed writing a bunch of melodies really quickly from any given lyric set. So for Denver, I think, Dave, did you do the free write for Denver, or was that Auyon?
I was not involved at all in Denver. That was my task in that one, was coming in at the end and saying it's done.
Oh yeah, I recall that. Yeah, that you just basically jumped in and said nobody touch anything, just freeze and play the song again. So
as is my way.
Which is a very important voice in our group. Right. Otherwise, we can keep on permuting until the end of time. But it's either somebody says it's done or a deadline forces us to stop. But basically, Auyon did a free write. Don took that free write and turned it into a verse, and he was sort of thinking of almost like a Western style song. It had this sort of take me back to Denver, kind of sad, lonesome cowboy vibe to it. And when he first gave me those lyrics, I sort of was pumping out these almost like Jackson Brown types of take me back to south of Denver, kind of these right. Denver, these things that were place where I was meeting, or kind of like old classic singer-songwriter tunes. And then I went into thinking of some more almost like pop rock melodic stuff. And then after a little while landed on the voice memo that ended up becoming the current melody. And I really enjoyed the process of like almost quickly trying different, what would you call it, like melodic clothing on the lyric set. It was like, try this shirt on, nope, that doesn't fit, try this one on, nope, and then eventually something would match it. It was,
we actually had another melody that came out of all of the wardrobe changes there that I remember we were kind of tempted to use that melody instead. The take me back to south of Denver.
That's the place where I was me. Feels like I've been dead forever and forever I will be. Yeah, it was sort of like a little more of a kind of a minor folky thing. And yeah, maybe that'll eventually become a tune as well. It's sort of a...
Or an outtake version. I mean, I can just record that and put it out for you as a B-side if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I should say that any time in the creative process that we can kind of get out of a rut, or get out of a lane that we're driving down and starting to get comfortable in, I think is really nice.
Yeah.
And I had started to get maybe a little too comfortable in, sit down with a guitar, kind of sing a falsetto tune over it for a while, maybe bring that to some of the guys, develop that into a bigger idea, match it up with another chorus. Now we have a very specific set of syllables that we have to write to, and then it becomes kind of like a math problem where it's like there are 7 syllables in the first part of the verse and it has this rhyme scheme, let's fit words to it.
Right.
And that still happens every now and then, but having words that we cared about that didn't have any particular tune attached to it, and then letting the tune spill out of that, I think was a really freeing thing. I know, at least for me, I liked changing up the process, and I also really liked the time spent together as a group, just kind of the group vibe of hanging out together and writing words and not worrying about finished product or which song is this going to go to or anything. It just allowed us to kind of share our feelings and enjoy writing together in for those few months that we were just writing lyrics. I know that I personally was that was like a high point creatively when I look back at the past few years.
Yeah, that's great.
I can squeeze a line with one hand, but I'm still dead as the Delaware. Now every day I dream of Denver and all of the living I left there.
I want to talk about the song Ocean Bed, and I want to talk about percussion on this record. On your previous albums, I always thought a lot of your songs had a percussive element to them, which was kind of interesting because there's very little actual drums on the songs. It was more of like a bluegrass feel of using the strings as percussion, right? But now on this album, we have drums, right? And there's a lot of percussive stuff happening on this song. So can you talk about the song Ocean Bed in terms of the use of drums on the album?
Yeah, that was a very fun one to put together. There are more different types of percussion, in air quotes, percussion on that song than I think we've ever really played with before, including my dog barking at some points. There's a broken washing machine, or well, I guess it wasn't broken. It was just very enthusiastically working, and I recorded it with my iPhone. It was actually in the house I'm in currently, my in-laws' washing machine, and it was just doing this awesome tumbling, like like something was clearly jostling around, and so I just recorded that on the iPhone, and we ended up using that. There's a clap track that involves, and Harrison Don, I think, put that together with a number of, body percussion and claps and that kind of thing, and then there's a full drum kit that comes in at certain points, and I feel like I'm leaving out at least one or two more things, but that was just for us having that for the whole album, having the percussion. I don't think we, I at least personally went in not expecting there to be a lot of drum kit on the album, but definitely wanting there to be a lot more percussion, and then our friend Ben Burns came over to my house and rehearsed with us one afternoon, and just, we had sent him a bunch of the songs and said, come over and let's try out some percussion ideas, and basically everything he did was gold. I mean, it was so exciting that it ended up being on almost every song. I think maybe there are 2 songs on the record that don't have drum kit of some kind. So it was a really, really fun part of this process for us that was totally different from the last couple of records.
Yeah, and going off what Dave said there with when Ben came over to his house to rehearse, we ended up just sticking up one microphone in the room in front of the drum kit and just capturing a bunch of the sounds while he was making stuff up on the spot. And a lot of the final tracks on the record are just that single microphone capturing him making things up with us in the room. Because I think just the vibes of it were just right. It didn't have to be a hi-fi sound when it's mixed with, the sound of a washing machine and a dog and things like that. It was just the energy of his ideas that informed a lot of the sculpting of the songs across the record. And also for Ocean Bed, I think it began with just a little, was that a little voice memo from Don where he was just playing, he was slapping his knees into a microphone, and then he quantized it on his computer. He was just rapidly, basically, drum rolling on his knees, and he snapped it into a grid to see what would happen, and then it just popped out this kind of skittering beat, and then he took that and copy-pasted it and built this melodic loop on top of it that ended up being the motif of the song, that dun 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 dun, that cycles over the top of that. And he thought it sounded sort of aquatic, and so he called the memo Chattering Ocean Bed, and then that grew into whatever it is with its many percussive things now.
Today I think that we might be underwater in a sea creature's dream, in a dreaming dream. No, there's no time for the end over end, and everything to do before dying again.
Get back to lyrics for a second. It is clear that you all take a lot of time and care with your lyric writing. I get the sense that this effort is not just choosing words that create the right imagery, but that the words themselves are chosen based on how they sound, right? How they sing. I'm kind of reminded of Andrew Bird a little bit here. We hear words and phrases you generally might not find in a song, in a folk song particularly, but they really kind of strike the ears well. They're great hooks. So is that a big part of what's happening in the creative process lyrically for you all?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely something I think a lot about, maybe because of my, as I said, coming from kind of an a cappella background.
Right.
That especially I guess when words are sung in harmony, the vowel sound matters a lot, and there's a very different thing to singing an oo than singing an ah or singing an a, and so if you're holding out a word on a particular vowel that has the wrong feel, then it's the wrong word. And that said, I think you can also play with that and end up trying to subvert it and sing vowels that sound a little strange, or sing words where you accent the wrong syllable, or I think it's not that there's a right way to do it. It's just that every note, every vowel sound or consonant sound just has a flavor, and it's important, especially I think in group singing, but maybe in general. I don't know that that's a group thing necessarily, but that's how I think of it. It's an important element. It's like, the words are almost instruments in that sense, like that the language is an instrument. If you can sort of choose to play it or not, but it's one that we definitely think about.
Yeah. Let's talk about the lyrics to another song, Green and Evergreen. Here we have like theme of time passing. So some of the lyrics, I was growing, I was dying, dark and getting darker soon. I also pick up kind of an underlying corresponding musical theme, kind of an urgent driving beat here that kind of matches, at least to me, that kind of anxiety about time passing. And the drums are driving again, the drums on this song. Can you talk about this song a little bit, now that I've babbled about it?
I think I appreciate what you're saying about it. That one actually took a long time to come together. It went through just a bunch of different phases of, it ended up being like 2 song ideas sort of coming together to become the verse of the song, and then it was this wide open slow beat, and then when Ben came to play drums on that day we were experimenting with him at Dave's house, he played this subdivided rolling snare beat that recontextualized the song, and then a slow strumming nylon part that I had played, I put through a few delay effects, and it turned into this, and a distortion, and it turned into this kind of distorted, jittery sound when combined with the snare that made the whole song kind of flutter or something.
Right. There's definitely a flutter in there.
Yeah, or at least stutter, I guess. And then the choruses served as sort of a clearing from that, just like a little bit of a breath, and then everything dropping back in. Choruses came together really late in the process for us on that song. I think the final week, basically, is that right, Dave? Like the last week of mixing, we recorded those choruses in and got them into place after the pandemic had hit, and we were on separate recording setups at our separate houses and still talking about what the lyrics of the chorus would be. It was sort of it was very inefficient, but ended up coming together. I think that like the song ended up, every now and then there's a song where the lyrics are self-fulfilling. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in the songwriting process, where it's like, I was growing, I was dying, and you're sitting there late at night being like, I feel that right now. I'm about to pass out. Or like, or on this one, the things will change and change again, like theme of time passage and sort of repetitive cycling, like pouring back over the same thing over and over again, but it altering over time and things getting comfortable with change. I think the song almost ended up like the creative process and the recording of it was like a reflection of the lyrics themselves. It was folding in like a fractal or something.
The oak and poison ivy, as the lemon light was alkaline. I was growing, I was dying. Growing, I was dying. Bright and bright through the trees, looking up at green and evergreen, free and looking to be free, looking to be free.
I'd like to talk about another song here, Crystal Caving, one of my favorites on the record. Then you were talking about the lyrics and how they reflect on what's happening. I know that some of the work on this album was done before the quarantine and then some near the later. And it's kind of interesting to listen to this album and kind of figure out what might have been before or not. So, for example, this lyric, Natural and the Disasters and Everything After. Natural and Disasters, by the way, I think would be a great band name for your next project. But that lyric kind of stood out to me, and I was kind of wondering how this song came about and whether that was a prediction or maybe a reflection on what was happening.
Your questions are so thoughtful and great, and in this case, actually, just so entirely on the nose, because we were questioning whether we could use that lyric because at least somebody in the band thought it sounded too much like a band name. So
that was Don. Yeah,
Don was.
Well, tell him I've got dibs. No.
That was all pre-pandemic that was written. So there were a few things that they took on new meanings once the pandemic happened, and in kind of an interesting way. It felt like it was strange to finish up the album during the pandemic, but most of the writing, as you said, happened beforehand. So we did certainly did some retroactive, saying, oh, actually, I guess this is about this now.
Right.
Yeah,
it's funny. Sometimes you can look back on a song 5 or 7 years later, and it might mean something different to you, but this was kind of happening in real time with some of these for you all.
Natural and the disasters and everything after on the hour, every hour. Yes, at your convenience, one of many and the many make the garden grow. Hear nothing growing but the trees erupting. Black light gold. Everything's gold.
I want to talk about sense of place in your music. You all met at school in Massachusetts, and now almost all of you call that area home. At least you all did for a long time, right? There seems to be a scene or a vibe in that general area of like-minded musicians. I know just from the roster of people we've had on the show, Western Den, Ballroom Thieves, Lula Wiles, Heather Maloney, David Wax Museum, they've all come from that area. And I find that pretty interesting. How do you think this sense of place makes its way into your music and your creative lives?
You just named a lot of wonderful artists and good friends of ours that we've toured with. I think, have we toured with everybody that you just named? For a lot of them, sometimes for months or years. And
they all have roots or associations with the greater Massachusetts area, am I right?
Absolutely, yeah, because we met in the town that's the furthest northwestern point in the state, and then moved east to Central Mass in the valley, and then moved east to the Boston area. And so, very connected to the land and, kind of the entire state from east to west there. And, the community, I think, I really appreciate, a strong sort of sense of, I should say, sense of community. Places like Club Passim that are in Harvard Square, where they've been supportive of folk and singer-songwriter music for decades now, and there's a continued tradition in that vein in Massachusetts. And there's also sort of a coffee house culture, this idea of we're going to a meeting house or a coffee house and performing, so this kind of community built around folk music. And at the same time that there's that traditional scene, I find that most of the artists from the area are willing to experiment a good amount and take music in new directions and try to kind of take folk music and folk sounds into a new era or a new realm. Mm-hmm. And so all the artists that you named are people who are doing that, and I think that's been encouraging for us to find that there's both a community for playing just a straightforward, folk song in a traditional format and singing harmony on it, and then also an appreciation for jumping off the deep end a bit and experimenting, and that you can find a home. It's sort of like people are not as much drawing lines on genre as much as they are just saying, are you a good person? Are you writing songs that you care about? And are they sounding nice? And now let's go on tour together.
Right. Okay, I appreciate you taking the time. I want to ask one more kind of broad question about the album before we finish up here. I believe from what I read about the making of this album, the entire recording process, there was a part of it at the beginning that was more intensely together than you had done before, right? Living at the studio kind of together for the first part of the record. And then eventually at the end, more separate than in the past, right? Because you literally were quarantined in separate places as you finished the record. So now that you've had some time to reflect and listen to the record now, the completed work, can you get a sense of those divergent methods? Do they speak to you as you listen to it, or is it more of a unified whole?
I am very connected to the songs on this record because they are an actual record. They're like a snapshot of a bunch of different things happening to us over a period of time.
Right.
And certain songs you can really hear sort of like, here is the initial demo where we're making it up at Dave's house, and then here is us hanging out in the studio together, working it with all the production elements, and the full drum kit, and then here is trying to figure out how to sing the other parts, when we're stuck at home during the pandemic, and having each of those imprints on a song. To me, it's like the song has all these layers of meaning and experience that kind of are like stamped on the tune.
Yes.
And like a song like February Stars, that's I think it begins side B. The whole outro, like the section called Stars, all of the singing, I think, did all the singing happen after the fact, Dave? Or like your part had gone down, I think, before the pandemic hit. And then all of the crafting of the harmonies we did by just passing it around and saying, like, just layer up on it and see what happens. And sort of the outro of the song is, it's like the piece of the pandemic section of our lives almost tacked on to the back side of the song. It's like a tail end that tells that story. So I know that I enjoy hearing that contour across the record. I don't know if anybody else can hear that except for us. Like,
right.
If the nuances are too subtle, but for me, I can pick up, or maybe it's just knowing the slight differences. I can hear that kind of story there.
Yeah, I think you've created something, like you say, that is kind of a snapshot. I mean, when you look now back at your catalog, this will be the record that is a document of this insane period that we have all lived through and you recorded and created through. I think it makes the record all that more interesting to the listener.
Thank you.
For that. And, technically, I think you pulled off an amazing stunt, getting it done and sounding so cohesive. So my hat is off to you for that also.
Thank you. I almost lost my mind. I don't know how you fared, Dave, but I was in headphones during the mixing phase. We all were for days on end, and I it took like a toll on my emotional health. I came out of it kind of confused, also because we were deepening into the pandemic quarantine time, and I just came out of it like, what has occurred? I don't know.
Yeah, I think my peak crazy was when I didn't trust myself enough. We were comparing different bounces of things, and it would be version A has this compressor and version B has this compressor, which already is like a level of subtlety that I'm not that attuned to, but right. I was trying my best to participate and develop an opinion, but I knew that if I knew which one I was listening to, that was going to color my thoughts, because this happens all the time where you'll tell an engineer, like, hey, could you turn me down a little bit? Great, that's great, thanks. And they'll say, I didn't do anything yet. And you're constantly like playing these mind games of, did that change? Did it not change? What is it doing anything? Is it real? So I had to like make myself this sort of double blind. I don't even know what that means. It's just a term I've heard. Like a blind test where I changed all the names of the files and then I made it so the file names were hidden, so that I couldn't tell which file I was playing, and I had to make like 30 copies so that, because otherwise I would kind of know which one it was. So, and then I managed to develop an extremely strong opinion about which compressor I liked better.
Well, whatever you did, it worked. I'm gonna let you guys go. We went a little over time, so I appreciate your sticking out with me. I really enjoyed talking with you both, Harris and Dave. I know you've done a lot of talking about this amazing record over the last couple of months, and are really looking forward to when you get to stop talking about it and start playing the songs live. We're all looking forward to that too. So thanks, both of you, for taking the time and for sharing your music with the world.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, and really appreciate getting to chat with you.
Okay, guys.